So tonight I want to talk about Sass some. So you've probably heard about Sass. If you haven't, don't worry. We're going to go through what it is, what it does. So far I have just a skeleton Rails app set up, and hopefully it's all working correctly. And I got the server running for us, so I'll close that out. So let's go and look at, it keeps opening in my other browser. There we go. So Sass, what is Sass? Sass is, as their homepage says, CSS with superpowers. So Sass is the most mature, stable, and powerful professional grade CSS extension language in the world. Now, they're obviously talking themselves up some, but Sass is very widely used and probably the most popular of the CSS extension languages. There's also less out there and some others, but Sass is probably the big one. Now, Sass stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, and it builds on top of CSS and fixes some of its problems and generally will make it way better. So we're going to go through some of the things that Sass does and how to use it. So something that's wrong with CSS is it's not so dry. So let me see. Oh, if I can, let's see what's going on here. If we can find any actual something nested that might have. Okay, so we see, make this a little bit bigger. Oh, I guess I clicked. Let me get back to right here. So we see all these styles, and all that the browser can read is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So even if you're using Sass, that gets turned into CSS. And we see we have this a active, a hover, a focus, class alert, a comma, dot class toolkit, a class alert, a hover, comma, class toolkit, a hover, comma, class alert, a focus, and it's very repetitive. We see we have an A that's being overridden by another A, that's being overridden by this A, and the element selections are sometimes just really verbose. So you have to repeat these really large sections selectors as you target more and more deeply nested items. And another thing about CSS that is an issue is we can't store variables in CSS. So if we want to keep multiple things in the same color, we have to go change all of them. So let's say, you know, this page has, I guess there isn't as much on this page. Let's look for a page that has some more stuff going on. We'll look here. So there's like, this is pink, and this is pink, and this is pink, and this text is pink, and this text is pink. And if they wanted to change, the Sass people wanted to change all those pinks to a different color, they would have to go change that in every place that it's mentioned, because these aren't all going to be the same class or have the same ID. You know, these are all different elements. So they're all going to have to be changed individually. So if you had a variable that was, say, pink, you could use that variable all over the place. And then if you want to change the colors, you could just change what that variable is equal to. With that, you also repeat large chunks of style all over the place because you have something that's more nested, but it can't inherit from anything. So you have to repeat the code of its parent to make sure that, you know, lots of things are staying in line. Yep. So Sass is something that's going to help with a lot of these problems. And Sass is known as a CSS preprocessor. So you can't just write Sass code and it'll work. It has to be processed. And what happens when it's processed is it takes the Sass that you've written and converts it into CSS. So ultimately, it's all going to get turned into CSS. It's just a way of writing it differently. It's a language. So it's kind of like we can write ERB in a Rails view. And when we write ERB in a Rails view, it doesn't stay as ERB, it gets turned into HTML, and that's how the browser interprets it. So something that is awesome about using Sass is that it is natively supported in Rails. So you don't have to do any setup. It's just there. You can put it in your style sheets folder and it'll work. I believe when you generate your Rails project, it adds Sass Rails by default. So it is a gem. So if you remove that gem, it won't work. But by default, this gem comes with Rails. So it's there and you can use it. And all you have to do is make a file with .scss on it, and you're good to go. You write your Sass in here, and it works. So Sass is going to get read by your application and compiled into normal CSS. And then that is read by the browser. And Sass gets compiled, so we'll look at not only the Sass code, but how it gets turned into CSS. So let's look at some things that we can do with Sass, because it's fun. So one of the first things to know is that all valid CSS is also valid SCSS. So anything that you can do in CSS, you can do in a Sass file. And then Sass has these additional things that you can do on top of it. So we'll look at both things. We'll look at some CSS. We'll also look at some variables. So, or some Sass things. So one of the first things that we can do is we can set variables. So to set a variable in Sass, we have this $. I think I changed this for some reason. Yeah, let me get this looking right so everything will load properly. Require, I guess this needs to go above here. Space star equals require tree underscore tree period. Okay, it's good for now. Okay, so variables. A variable definition in Sass is going to start with a $, and then we could say main color. We have a colon. We could set a color. Let's make it, is that black? We could do it with anything. So let's say font. And the variable names are whatever we want them to. So we could say something like sans. We could set up some sans fonts. Nova. I thought I had, font. What is it? Font family. There's a, it's gonna pop up when I type it later. There's some thing that's gonna fill, like it pops up, whatchamacallit, suggestions, and it's pretty cool, and it makes this easier. Okay, so we'll put some in here. Let's say Helvetica, and then Helvetica, and then Arial, and finally sans serif. So now we have two variables. So let's set some things up. Let's say our body right now. This is one of our views. Has this styling on it. Oh, it's because we're adding in this guy. So I need to, let me just move this somewhere. Where can I move this? Move it to the root. Okay, I'll just delete this. Copy it, delete it. There we go. Okay, so now we have our raw page. That's where I want it to be. I forgot that when I required the tree, it was going to take everything in. Okay, so let's style our body. Let's make this not black. That's going to be horrible. What's that? That's better. Unless anybody has some other colors, feel free to let me know and we'll set it up. So let's say background color of the body, and here we can just put in our variable. And then let's say font family. There's all the suggestions. But we have some lists now, or we have some already. Let's say font sans. Now if we go back to our page, I guess I can load this up some and refresh. See our fonts have changed, and now we have this background color. So think about if you had this color all over the place, or you had this font all over the place, and then there was one thing that you wanted to change, you could just change that variable and be done with it. Now, if we look, this doesn't stay like this. Like I said, the browser only knows CSS, and that's all that it can interpret. So this gets compiled down, and we see background color. There we go, get that bigger. We see background color as F0, 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 and the font family as that text. We don't see any of the variables at all. It's getting compiled down by that Sass Rails gem, and that's how it's getting sent to the browser. So by default, this is kind of the general way that the asset pipeline loads things. And this loads each file separately in a specific order. We're loading the entire tree though first, and then we're following with self. If we had other things, they might be up here. Sometimes we'll see, I think, jQuery, Rails, and such. I guess that's in the JavaScript folder. Never mind. But other files would be in here. Now, this is fine for pretty much the most part, but we saw what happened before, how we were adding everything might not be what we want to do. So since each file is getting treated as separate, in this instance, any variables that we set will not be visible to any other file. And in Sass, we want to be able to create those variables and use them everywhere. And typically there might be one base file that has all of your variables set up for colors and such, and that's the one place that you would change them. So let's go ahead and change that right now. Sass allows us to use something called an @import file name to load one Sass file into another Sass file. So we can update our file to look like this, @import, and here we could say scores. Oh, we need scores. And we want to change this application.css to application.scss. And we're going to get rid of these now. And this should still be fine. See, everything still looks the same. We still have the same CSS. We're importing that scores. Now, let's talk a little bit more about why this is important, but we see that now because we're loading one file into another, we can have those variables around. So it's similar to when you think of imports in JavaScript type of thing. So what is basically happening here is this import statement is going to paste and copy and paste everything from that scores file into this application.scss file where we have our import command. Then it'll do the same with the next file that we imported if we had an import, and the next, and so on and so on. So pretty much it's taking all of everything and gonna combine it together into one big file, even though we have it all split up. And that will allow the variables to be seen by everything. And this method is used instead of the require comments. And this will also require that we import every style sheet in the project. Nothing's going to automatically be loaded. So this file might get really, really large, but we can import a file into another file. So we don't have to import every file to here. We might import a file into this scores.scss, and that in turn gets imported into the application.scss. So we could build out a tree structure in our style sheets, in our Sass sheets, just the same way that we build out a tree structure in views and such. So it's very, very standard to have something like, okay, we have views, so we might have a style sheets new folder for views. And in that views, we might have a new folder, oh, not new file, new folder for high scores. Then we might have a new folder for layouts. And that's where we would keep our style sheets mirroring our views, and then even breaking it down to, this might be the index, and then each page could have its own styles. So we can do that and then just import the same way relatively. I guess that means an underscore. Oh, I'm missing syntax. App asset style sheets. Maybe it needs a period. I always forget how that works. The periods and the double periods. Where are we at? Shouldn't need. Well, either way, as an example, I'll move this back so we don't get stuck on some syntax there, because that's not what this is about. No, I can't. Oh, it probably can't delete these because the server's running. There we go. Cool. I just wanted to clean that up. We'll keep looking at some Sass stuff now. Something else that we can do, which I think is one of the most powerful parts of Sass, is that we can nest selectors. So actually, I might need to add a little bit of CSS or a little bit of HTML here. I don't think I have this. Oh, we do. Oh, there's just no. I don't think there's anything in the database. Oh, seeds. No. Okay. Let me just make this a UL. I'm not worried about this iterator. Let's make a list of some things. There we go. All right. That wasn't what I wanted to do. All right. don't know where that came from, but it's cool. All right, that should give us the list of things. There we go. Now let's nest some selectors. So first thing we want to do is let's target that UL, that unordered list. And we could say, let's set a margin on it. Let's say 1M, 0, and let's set a border on it of 1 pixel, solid, goldenrod, or gold. Gold. This might look crazy. Yeah, this background is, what? Color picker? That's better. Now we should see this better. There we go. A lot easier on the eyes. Okay, now to select these list items, instead of having to do our CSS, which would be UL, LI, we can nest the selector right inside of this UL. And we can do LI, it's indented, and let's say padding 3M, 1M. Let's do a border on that too, just for fun. 1 pixel, solid. Let's do this orange red. And we'll pay attention to our CSS once we get this refreshed. And we see our list items with all the padding, a lot of padding, too much padding. Let's make that 2Ms. It's a little bit better. But if we go and look at our table, we see our UL and it has its styles, and nothing else. And we look at our list item and it has the UL LI. So that what we would have had to write for CSS, we get. And it has exactly what we would have had to write there. So we don't have to do that, and we can nest our selectors. It is considered bad practice to nest more than 3 layers deep. It just gets complicated. So keeping it broken up is good for that. Now, sometimes we'll want to nest code like this. However, we'll want to reference the parent selector that we're currently nested inside. So to do this, we're going to use the ampersand symbol. And that will get replaced with the current selector we're currently nested within. Now, this is useful for putting stylings on multiple things at once, including the parent selector. So where this happens often, and I see in code often, is with links. So we have a link, and its color is blue. And let's say, we want to take that line off. Text decoration, none. Okay, so now let's look at our one link. I'm also going to get rid of this padding. It's just too much. There we go. So we're looking at this link to change to have no line, no decoration. So there we go. We've changed it now. Now let's add a hover. So we can go and that's going to get replaced by the parent. So we do hover, and we'll see how this turns into CSS. Text decoration. We can say underline. So we refresh. Let's see what the CSS looks like. So we see when we have hover, text decoration is underline, it's overriding BAs. But that A hover, that ampersand turned into the parent. So it makes it nice and easy, especially as you might have to go 2 or 3 levels on the selectors to get here, and then you can just add those additional styles like that. This can also be useful, although I think links are where I've seen it the most, is that in, defining a different context where we might want different styling for our objects. So let's say we have a paragraph. I don't think there is one here. Let's see, table head, table row. No, that's fine. We'll see the thought process because this is more about a use case. So let's say the color is red. Red, there we go. And there might be times where we want, when it has, a different class, let's say a game class, because we're talking about high scores here. We can put the ampersand here and say color green. And that will compile down to a we should be able to see it. Let's get to CSS. Here we go. Actually, easier to go here and click here. That'll take us to the source. This is probably where we should have been hanging out the whole time. But we see that compiles down to the P and then the class game P. So those two are going to be completely separate. And that way we can write our stylings for all of our paragraphs and all their classes all in one place and just keep them that way. That also makes sure that we don't forget to color a paragraph somewhere. So something else that Sass allows us to do is a fun little thing for darkening and lightening colors. So we've got this link here. We've got a hover property. But let's add a background color here. What are we at right now? Maybe will work. Because we should, I guess, white. Let's make sure that's visible. I'm not a style person, a designer. For sure, there's a reason for that. Okay, there we go. We can see that. White. Now, instead of text decoration, let's do something here. Let's say background color. And Sass will let us do something like Lightening. And we see a little helper here, color and amount. So we can say, actually, let's set a variable here, link color, navy. That's just going to make it easier. And then here we can say link color. And then when we're lightening it, we can say link color and how much we want to lighten it. So I don't know, 40%. Sound good? And we can refresh. We also see that that was automatically taken care of for us. The hover with the background color that's lightened. I guess that's 40% lighter than navy. And let's see what happens. Now we see that changes. Same goes for darken. There's a darken function. I'm assuming 40% darker than navy is black. We'll find out. Yeah, black. So there's cool things like that in Sass. And I won't dive into too many of those helper type functions, but just want to let you know they're out there and they're fun to play with, and they make life a little bit easier, especially for us people who, like, I'd never be able to figure out what's 40% lighter than navy. We'll keep that like that. So variables allow us to define and reuse values, but there's also these things called mix-ins, which allow us to define and reuse chunks of code. So getting more dry through Sass. So let's look at doing that here. And here we have, let's look at our code again. A P, oh, there's nothing in there. An H1, a list, a link. Okay, so we have some things in here. So let's say to define a mix-in, we're going to do at mix-in, and then the name of the mix-in. So let's say title style. And I'll just throw some stuff in here. Just throw a margin on there, 0, 0. And font family is font sans. And font size, let's say 20 pixels. Font weight can be bold. And finally, let's change the text to a transform. Text transform, uppercase. Now, we have this entire set of things. And let's say we want to, let's style that H1. So we can say H1. We can do at include, and that'll let us include everything in a mix-in, title style. And then let's also change the color of that to, what was that up there? Sea green, there we go. That's a good one. Excuse me. And we'll see if we look at this high scores, we get all of that included for us in a mix-in. So that way we can have a group of styles that we include in places, and we don't have to worry about repeating that code. We just include it and it's there. So if we wanted to say do this li, we just do at include title style, and there we go. Fresh, and everything's added into there. Now, you might have noticed that when I was getting the little autocomplete for title style, it was throwing some parentheses around it, like it's a function. And that's because mix-ins can take arguments. So we could throw, let's say, color in here. And let's add a color here and call it color. So it's a variable because it has the $sign. And let's include a border, prefix, solid, also that color. And we can also use multiple arguments. Let's do that too, to show what we can do. Background, and let's make the background also an argument. Or also a variable. So now we can call this with these arguments, and we can say, where are we? So we have title style, we have color and a background. So we can do this. We can pass a color. Let's say that seashell or sea green. And the background, let's just say black. And when we refresh, oh, something's going on. Oh, we didn't include any defaults, and we used title style here without any variables. So it's throwing an error because it's looking for variables, looking for arguments, and we didn't give it any. So let's set some defaults. Let's say the background is going to be, what is this? Just go with black. By default, I guess I set black down here. We'll make this gray. We might not be able to see that. Let's go black and dark gray. Is that such a thing? Find out. Yes. Okay. And for the color, just say white. So we'll refresh, and we see the list items, ULLI, took all of those properties and the color sea green, background black that we passed in as an argument. We don't see the argument anywhere though. In the H1, we see the defaults, the dark gray and the white. We see the color. Oh, we had a conflict, 2 colors. Because of this, that took precedence. We overrode it in that style. Cool. Let's go through one more thing with Sass, and then, yeah, we'll take questions and be done at that point. But yeah, we'll do one more thing. Show how we can extend classes. So we can take all the styles that are applied to one class and apply it to another class. I guess I don't have any class styles here. Let me make one real quick for, let's say, title. Color. Purple, background, color, white. So if we want to extend this, do we have any classes here? Yeah, we have class title. Sweet. Let's add a class here. List. Simple. Okay, so we just add that class to the title. Don't know. Okay, so we see these changed. Now, if we wanted to add that to another class, we could say we have list here. I want to target that list. We could say @extend, like a class. I can say .title. So just like using classes in JavaScript or Ruby, we can extend things. Well, I guess Ruby doesn't use, yes, it inherits, it doesn't use extend typically. But JavaScript classes, they use the extend keyword, and some other languages do as well. So borrowing from that, we have extend, title, and then we could add other things to it, like let's say, and hover. So we're adding this to the list when it's being hovered over. Let's say background, color, darken, white 10%. Let's see if that works the way we're thinking. So all these should be changing now because of the class, or yeah. And then let's say 50%. See if that actually will work. I don't know if you, I'm not sure if you can hover over a UL. Maybe not. Yeah, I think this is just for elements. We get the picture, and we can see how the code created title list, list hover. Oh, I'm missing that colon should do it. Though it'll probably be odd. There we go. List, class list hover. 50% might be too much now. Let's go 20%. So we're taking the style from the title and applying it to the list. Then we also have that list hover in there as well. So that's very quick coverage of Sass. This evening, we went through what Sass is, how it works, how it's natively available in the Rails asset pipeline. Went through where to put your Sass and your style sheets, your app asset style sheets folder, or maybe I didn't mention that, but we've seen that. And how to include it in our application, in our applications.scss, and using it as an import so that we can include the variables across our project. We went through a little bit of style folder structure, and then we went through Sass variables, which are very useful, and use them around in a few different places. We went through nested Sass properties and how we can just tab to limit them and use them. We went through our inheritance with the ampersand symbol. Looked at mix-ins for groups of style code and passing them arguments, and then passing them arguments with default variables. We looked at classes and extending those classes in other classes, class styles. What else? We looked at this lighter and darken functions and found out that there's a bunch of those. We didn't look at many though, just a few. And we saw throughout how Sass is just compiling down to CSS in the end. It's all CSS, nothing special, nothing tricky. It's all CSS, and valid CSS works in a SCSS file, because in the end, it's just CSS. So, any questions? Well, I'm going to take that as there aren't any, because it's been silent for, oh. Yeah, you'll need to reference documentation for sure. There's a ton of those things like Darken and Lighten. There's actually a course, I can't remember where it is, and it's like, it has a function, or I guess a feature for every letter of the alphabet. So like A was ampersand, and it was that, you know, ampersand inheritance thing. And yeah, there's a bunch of them. But the documentation's cool, and these are all like the big major ones: the inheritance, the mix-in, the class extending, the nesting. Those are really the big things that you'll see, and variables that you'll see in use. And then the other things are a little bit more, I guess you could say, power Power Sass users use. I haven't seen as many of them used, but variables and just nesting the CSS in an SCSS file makes your code so much cleaner. And then using mixins makes it even cleaner and drier. And yeah, those are the big wins with Sass.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. That's all really helpful to know.
Yeah.
Before tonight, I had forgotten all about Sass. So, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's something that a lot of companies use and a lot of jobs use. So I try and do a lecture on it once a month, once every 2 months, just to refresh people and see that it's out there. And because it is native in Rails, like, might as well use it if you're doing anything in Rails, and it's there. You don't even have to set anything up. You just start writing it and using it. So it makes it real easy to work with. You have to do a little bit more setup in a Node backend with JavaScript type stuff. So compiling it and picking it up and such, it's not as simple because it has to be converted through a processor, the preprocessor. But it's not super difficult, but it's just a little bit more setup than Rails gives us. But right on. Thank you very, very much for coming and hanging out for a little while.